I assume we're expecting them, aren't we, Peter?
Yeah, we should be expecting both of them. Rebecca, you sent packets to both of them, I saw last week,
Yes.
right?
Yes, I did. Yes. So actually, you are now live, Colin. Sorry, I started. I can't take it back.
That's all right.
I will email the applicants.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like we got one of them. Yeah, we've got both now.
Okay. All right, so we'll call to order this meeting of the East Lansing Zoning Board of Appeals. Good evening. My name is Conrad Hittner. I'm the current chair of the ZBA. This is the June 2nd, 2021 meeting of the East Lansing Zoning Board of Appeals. The board is composed of 7 citizen volunteers who are appointed by City Council. Our secretary is Mr. Peter Menser of the city's Planning, Building, and Development Department. Our charge is to hear appeals from provisions of the city's zoning code, Chapter 50, and to grant variances when warranted using procedures and criteria detailed in the code. The code specifies that 4 affirmative votes are required to grant a variance. Since 4 affirmative votes are required by ordinance to grant an appeal, the absence of one or more members of the board could affect the outcome of an appeal. Therefore, the board shall grant a continuation of an appeal to a subsequent meeting if all the conditions are met. Number 1, fewer than 7 members of the board are present and voting on the appeal. That is actually this evening's situation. We have 6 out of our typical 7 board members available tonight. Secondly, the appellant affirmatively states on the record the desire to continue the appeal prior to our deliberations. The appeal shall be continued to the next regular board meeting of the board unless an alternative time is agreed to by the board and the appellant. Our procedure is to first review a written staff report with Mr. Menser. Then we hear an appeal by the applicant. Next, we review written comments on the appeal. After that, we listen to comments from all who wish to speak on the appeal. Each speaker is required to provide their name and address for the record using a speaker card. I assume we'll forego the speaker card in the online mode this evening. All who speak should direct their comments to the board and refrain from engaging in dialogue with others in the audience while speaking. The applicant will then be given an opportunity for final comments. We'll then enter the deliberative phase using Robert's rules. During this period, audience members may listen to the deliberations but may not speak except to answer questions directed to them by the chair. In most cases, a decision is reached by the board the same evening an appeal is heard. If you wish to speak, please refer to the back of the agenda for additional guidance. All right, Mr. Menser, if you'd call the roll, please.
Thank you very much. Member Hittner.
Present online in East Lansing.
Yeah, and sorry, again, I should remind everyone we're going to do your name attending remotely and then where you're attending from. So your city and county. Member Laxton.
Brian Laxton, attending remotely, currently in East Lansing in County.
Member Shulgian.
Susan Chaldron, attending remotely from East Lansing, Ingham County.
Member Smith.
Member Smith, attending remotely from East Lansing.
Member Cheltenham. Not in attendance. Member Lull.
Ismet Lal, attending remotely from East Lansing, Ingham County.
Member Ditchman.
Andrea Ditchman, attending from East Lansing, Ingham County.
6 members present.
Thank you, sir. You've all had a copy of the agenda that's been forwarded to you with tonight's packet. Can I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Likewise, you received draft minutes from our May 5th meeting. Are there any additions, corrections that need to be made to that document? Okay, seeing none.
Oh.
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to know, I believe that we should mark Mr. Hittner as the chair of the meeting. If you see at the very bottom, it says Mr. Laxton, and we changed chairs relatively early in the meeting.
All right. With that amendment, anything else? Okay, can I have a motion to approve those amended minutes?
Motion to approve?
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the minutes of last meeting are approved. Mr. Menzer, any communications that we need to know about?
We have no written communications. I'd like to share a couple things with you, if that's all right, separate from that.
Sure.
Okay, as I noted to the chair in a separate email today, I just wanted to note I did receive an email from the applicant at 211 North Lawn, the request that the ZBA considered at its last meeting on May 5th. And that note was an intent to provide some additional information for a potential rehearing of that case. If you'll know, as you all probably know, the ZBA, if there are items that are considered changed circumstances or new evidence that the ZBA can reconsider. That information has not been provided to me, but when it is, I will share it with the group and schedule it for a meeting for your consideration for a potential rehearing in the future. I also wanted to note quickly, hopefully you all received the email from Rebecca with your terms. There were a couple questions at the last meeting about your membership terms. So if you have any questions about that, you can get with me sometime after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, moving on to new business. Our first item of new business is a request from Gideon Bradburd and Marjorie Weber to install an 8-foot tall fence on the northern property line of 867 Audubon Road. Ms. Radialis, is Mr. Bradburd and Ms. Weber with us?
It looks like Marjorie Weber is with us. I'm not sure if Mr. Bradburd is because there's one number. I don't know who it is.
Okay.
Rebecca, that's a member of our staff, the 274, so we don't need to call on that number.
Oh, okay. So Marjorie has her hand raised. Would you like me to allow her to talk?
Yes, actually, I need to ask her a couple of questions before we proceed.
All right, Marjorie, the floor is yours.
Hi, this is Marjorie and Gideon. We're both here.
Oh, great. Mr. Bradburd, Ms. Weber, as a preliminary matter, because we have only 6 members available to hear your appeal tonight, as a threshold issue, I need to know whether you're inclined to proceed with your hearing tonight. You have to get 4 affirmative votes in favor of your variance request to get it. You have only 6 members here to listen to your presentation and consider the facts. Obviously, it'd probably be easier to get 4 or it might be easier to get 4 votes with 7 folks hearing rather than 6. And we're certainly willing and able to continue the matter if you want to kick this to another date when we have 7 bodies to listen to you.
What's the procedure in the event that we don't get, this is Gideon, by the way, hello.
Sure.
In the event that we don't get 4 votes tonight, is there any procedure for retrying this with more people present?
No, you essentially have to make your decision as to whether you want to proceed with 6, only 6 at this point, actually, according to our instructions before we begin deliberations. So I may ask you this question again after we've heard some information, but before we begin deliberations. But there's no do-over with 7 if you decide to go ahead tonight with 6.
Okay, we're fine going ahead with 6 in the interest of everyone's time.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then we'll proceed. Mr. Menzer, why don't you tell us what we need to know?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in your staff or in the packet tonight, you'll see on, at least in my packet, it's page 8, starts an agenda item report from our city staff here on this request. So it's a request from the applicant to install an 8-foot tall solid fence on the north property line at 867 Audubon. As you'll see in the memo, there's this property is somewhat unique in its layouts. It's got a small area of frontage on Audubon, but quite a bit of frontage on Saginaw Street. The applicant's proposing to actually replace an existing fence on the north property line along Saginaw Street. So they would remove an existing 6-foot tall fence and install an 8-foot tall fence, approximately 117 feet in length along that north property line. And as you can see, it's adjacent to Saginaw Street. The city's ordinance, I would definitely note that the city zoning ordinance, we allow a 3-foot tall fence, but only when it's located on that property line. And it can be increased to 6 feet when it's at least 20 feet back from the property line. And in this case, the applicant is requesting to install an 8-foot tall fence along that entire frontage, along that Saginaw frontage. So a variance of 2 feet is requested in this case. So as I noted, there's 22 feet of frontage on Audubon, approximately 117 on Saginaw. The parcel's conforming. There is a single family home constructed on the site that was built in the late 60s. I have not been able to find any other variances in that area for a fence along Saginaw, although there are some others in my driving around that area. I do see some other fences, but wasn't able to find any actual documentation or variances that were granted by this board for those. The only thing I would note in our staff comments is that ingress and egress is off Audubon. There's no vehicular or pedestrian access off Saginaw. If you took a look at the aerial photo in our staff memo, the sidewalk stops just short of this property. To the west, there are, I think, 4 properties in a row that front on Saginaw, and the sidewalk stops short of that. So this property really has no access out to Saginaw, as is now. The posted speed limit on Saginaw is 45 miles an hour, and most recent traffic counts from MDOT on Saginaw Highway, that was from 2019, showed approximately 30,000 vehicle trips in that area. If you have any questions for me, please do let me know. And then, as we heard earlier, the applicant is available to answer any questions or provide supplemental information on the request. Thanks.
Brian, I see you have a question.
Yeah, Mr. Menser, as far, and I know there's a number of fences that are erected that are along Saginaw. In fact, one of those fences I was directly involved in with this board many, many years ago. But at that time, the maximum we could get was 6 foot. What I'm wondering is how many 8-foot fence lines there are along Saginaw compared to the what I would presume would be the normal 6-foot fence.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to find that information. I did visually see that there were some other fences out there, but I didn't get out and measure any of them, and I didn't find any official records in any of the city information that provided that information.
Okay, thank you.
Any question from other board members? I have one or two, Peter. Is the existing fence on the property line now, or is it set back any distance?
It is on the property line now.
Okay, so all the land that's between the fence and the pavement of Saginaw Street, that's part of the right of way of the highway?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
I did not see an official survey for this property, so I'm assuming that it's road right of way.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for you at this point. Okay. Now we're ready to hear from Mr. Bradburd or Ms. Weber.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to make our case for you. We appreciate your time. The gist of it is that, since the speed limit has been raised on Saginaw, we get quite a bit of traffic noise coming in over the fence. And our fence that's currently there is in a pretty poor state of repair. I think it's about 25 or 30 years old. So we were looking to replace it, and we were trying to figure out what style of fence, what materials would do the most in buffering us from or mitigating some of the traffic noise. And one of the things we found in our research is that there's a pretty significant reduction in the decibel level of traffic noise with extra height. And those 2 extra feet of height could potentially decrease the amount of noise that we experience in our yard by like a factor of 2, which would be a lot in changing our experience. We don't, so that's why we want it. We made our case written out in the pamphlet that we sent in, but the long and short of it is that we don't really have any neighbors whom we think this would affect, because there's no access from the street, right? It's mostly just motorists. There's no sidewalk. There's not going to be a lot of foot traffic or anything. And there actually is at least one other 8-foot fence along that stretch of Saginaw. It's a different style. It's like 6-foot solid fence and then 2 feet of lattice on top, which, as I understand it, doesn't require the same variance. But, just physically, there is some precedent. There's also, that area, the right-of-way area, is a pretty significant vertical drop. And so the difference in height between the neighbor's fences, between our fence and the neighbor's fence, wouldn't be super noticeable, even for the passing motorist who cares a lot about, fence congruity across the neighboring lots, because it's up this berm. So I think the impact would be pretty minimal for the city, but could be pretty big for us in our enjoyment of the backyard. I'm also happy to answer any questions about the layout or the materials or, whatever.
Any board members with questions for Mr. Bradburd? Mr. Laxton.
Yes, Mr. Bradburd, did you obtain a variance to locate the fence on the property line, the original 6-foot fence? Maybe it was way before your time owning the home. Do you know whether there was a variance that was approved for that? Because if it wasn't set back 20 feet from the property line, it's on the property line and it's 6 foot, I'm assuming they would have needed a variance.
We don't know it. We've only lived here for 4 years, and that fence is at least 36 years old, according to our neighbor. So we're not sure.
Understood.
Ms. Lull, I thought I saw you had a hand up at one point.
I do. So the main reason you want this is as a sound barrier, right?
Yes, that's right.
So my understanding of sound barriers is it's more a function of mass than it is necessarily of height. So you're saying that 2 feet of the same width that's currently there, or a similar width that's currently there, because you're going to replace it, would make that much of a difference? 2 feet?
Yeah, we did some, we looked into some of the, published research on fence sound attenuation with fence material and height, because we were thinking also, about what material would best help us sound attenuation. And it said the research that we attached some of these citations to our proposal here also, but the research that we found on that was published said that an extra 2 feet of fence would lead to a 9.6 decibel sound reduction. And because decibel sound reduction is perceived on a non-linear scale, that can be perceived as up to a 10-fold decrease in noise levels, is what we understood from the research. So the added 2 feet did seem like, we tried to look into it a lot because we didn't want to waste people's time for something that would be, minimal sound reduction, or pay the extra cost of the materials, obviously, if it wouldn't really matter for sound reduction. And we do believe it would.
So what research did you do? Just the information that you provided? Did you have anyone come out and look at it, engineering?
No, so we just looked, so we're both scientists at Michigan State. So we just looked into the primary literature on fence height or barrier height and how it affects noise propagation. So yeah, these are empirical results from traffic noise studies.
And we also used a publication quality noise meter to measure the noise in our yard, and found that we can pretty consistently get above 70 decibels in our yard, which is above the federal standards for traffic noise. So it's pretty high back there.
So you work in a related field related to sound? Is that physics, engineering?
We're both biologists, but we're quantitative biologists. I do statistics. We both do statistics. So this is a literature we felt comfortable navigating.
Yeah, we teach statistics at Michigan State. But we're not experts in sound.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Ms. Weber or Mr. Bradburd? I just have a couple, and it doesn't matter which of you answers this question, I guess. So you all have lived there for 4 years, is that right?
Yeah, we moved in August 2016.
Okay. And the 45-mile-an-hour speed limit that's been in existence on Saginaw Highway, which according to your correspondence, it indicated it predates substantially your arrival at that address, right?
Yeah, definitely.
We couldn't find the exact date that the speed limit changed, but we think it was about 15 years ago from
Right.
newspaper articles, but we weren't sure the exact time.
Yeah, I don't remember whether it was that one or Grand River that the city was involved in lots of litigation with the state about whether they had authority to set lower speed limits. But
Yeah, that was Saginaw.
I think it was both Saginaw.
It was
Okay.
Grand River. They changed it from 25 to 35, Conrad.
Right.
You-
I think
It's
I
one
was
of
It
those-
was the big,
I have vague recollection from 20 years ago that it was like 35 when I moved into town, but
I
it
think-
it went up. But
I think I was on the Transportation Commission at that time, and I think you're right. I think it's both.
okay. Have you all thought about doing anything to your house to attenuate the noise as opposed to the fence?
Yeah, so the noise level in the house isn't noticeable. It's not that bad. As long as we have windows closed and stuff. And on the south side of the house, it's actually quite quiet. So the house is an old pump house. It's an old municipal building. So it's a large brick building, and it really does a lot to attenuate sound. So on the south side of our lot, we have like a little a parking area and a little side yard, and it's very quiet there. But the largest yard, the big parcel of land on the north side, there's not really anything we could do to the house to try to. There's no way to change the house to block the noise coming off the highway, because it's just there's nothing between the yard and the highway.
Okay. And is the fence in its current state repairable at the same height?
It's enough of the panels are pretty well rotted, and some of the the posts have a pretty significant lean that I don't think. I mean, I think it would be a full reinstall. I mean, the wood is like 30 plus years old.
Right.
It's not in great shape.
Okay, I understand. All right. Does any of that prompt questions from any board members? All
I
right.
got a question. If one of the applicants could just describe how they feel it affects their quality of life, the excess noise level.
Sure. I mean, I guess I'll give you two answers. So the first is, just the backyard, especially in the nice weather, is where we like to spend a lot of our time. We have two small kids. We like to garden. We're both biologists. We like to garden. We like to spend time out there with the family. And so having a lot of highway noise isn't super conducive to outdoor fun with the family. But the other thing I'll say is that noise decibel level, there's been some research that it can have some significant biological effects. It's been linked to, and this is just correlational, but it's been linked to higher blood pressure, to effects on sleep, to effects on mental health and well-being. And the WHO standard for exposure thresholds is like 30 decibels below what we're measuring at a regular basis in the backyard at like noon on a weekday. So, it's pretty noisy.
I'll just add that if we're having dinner out on our deck, it's hard to hear each other talking for considerable portions of it. And if we're in our kitchen and want to open a window, it's pretty unpleasant. So we often choose not to have windows open on that side of the house because the noise coming in is so loud if the window's open. So it's affecting our enjoyment of the property pretty substantially. Yeah.
Ms. Law.
And I don't mean this question in a sarcastic way at all. I truly just want an answer. When you bought the house and you toured the property and you were in it, were you aware of the sound level?
Yeah, we love the property and we love being close to Glencairn Elementary School, which also is right on this road, by the way. And the sound level was kind of the big downside. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll just add, we knew the previous tenants. So we were moving here to start our faculty jobs and we're moving with pretty limited savings. And we knew the previous owners of the house and they agreed to sell the house to us off market. So we got really substantial savings and that was kind of worth it, even though we were pretty hesitant at the time about the noise levels in the backyard. And it's something we've been, trying to figure out how we could address, or if we could address. And the fact that the fence is now in such a state of disarray is kind of giving us the kick to explore this option.
It is the number one thing that would probably make us move if we do decide to move.
Okay. I just wanted to hear your explanation. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, Ms. Weber or Mr. Bradburd, that you want to tell us?
No, I think that we've said our piece. If there's any further questions, we're happy to answer them, or if anyone has any questions about the figures that we included in the proposal.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Mintz, are there any other written comments that we received from any of the folks notified of this?
No, sir.
Okay. And are there any other folks online who wish to address the board on this particular appeal?
I will ask each of the attendees. Colin Davey, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. My name is actually Scott Weber. I'm using Colin Davey's computer. I'm a property owner. I'm on 914 Terrain. My home faces Saginaw, facing south on Saginaw. I am actually facing the property that is in question. Again, my name is Scott Weber, and no relation to the other individuals. But so my property, I have 2 lots here. Both facing Saginaw, and I face directly across the street is the neighbors to the property in question. And then I have a vacant lot that is right next to my house, and also which would actually be east on Saginaw. And that has a 6-foot cyclone fence that is at the top of the embankment, similar to across the street on the property that we're speaking about. I can attest to the noise, although I have not tested decibel levels here. I can definitely attest to the challenges that they are speaking of, and I believe that it's probably safe to say that that my property is the only one at this point in time that is actually facing the structure or the fencing that is in question. I have no objection whatsoever to that additional 2 feet variance. I believe I am the only one who's actually would be have visual sight of that fence, because of the fact that the vehicles traveling up and down Saginaw at 45 miles an hour, they don't see the fence because it's another 12 feet higher than the vehicle level. So, so for what it's worth, in support of their variance, I have no objection, to that, and would certainly appreciate the, anyone attempting to, increase their, increase the that visual component of the fence, and the structural integrity as well. So if there's a chance that that helps to mitigate some of the decibel levels, then at some point in time I might be submitting a similar request.
All right, are there any questions from the board members for Mr. Weber? All right, seeing none. Thank you, sir.
All right, the next the next attendee to speak is Jamie Fanning. Jamie, you are allowed to speak.
Hi, this is actually Laura Fanning. Jamie Fanning is with me. We are the family that is applying for the next variant. So for what it's worth, this sounds like a good idea for them and I support it, but we don't have much knowledge in that area.
All right, thank you, Ms. Fanning.
The last attendee to speak is Jessica Livingston. Jessica, you're now allowed to speak.
Ms. Livingston, you're on mute if you're.
Thank you. I do not have comment at this time.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So at this point, we would begin deliberations. As I had indicated earlier, I will give our applicants another opportunity to decide to have this considered by a full seven person board meeting at a subsequent meeting, if that's what you'd like to do, or we can proceed with the 6 that you have. What would you like to do?
I think we'd like to roll the dice and forge ahead.
All right. Ms. Weber, you're the same mind?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right. Discussions.
I think we have to have a motion on the table in order to start the discussion.
All right. Actually, I have a question or two for Mr. Menser before a motion.
Yes, sir.
Peter, the existing fence is 6 feet. I understand that it's fronting, so to speak, I guess more like backing against Saginaw Highway. Is it your contention that the ordinance as it's currently writ would limit a new fence installation on the property line to 3 feet?
Yes, if this current fence is removed, they would be able to construct a 3-foot fence on the property line.
All right. And so is the 6-foot fence that exists there now essentially grandfathered by its existence, by whatever circumstances it's come to be?
Yep, I would call it existing non-conforming.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have for Mr. Menser. Did that prompt any from any other board members? Okay, is there a motion with regards to this variance request?
I guess I have one follow-up question with Mr. Menser, if I may.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I just can't help myself.
It's fine.
Mr. Menser, is there any place in the ordinance which specifically identifies an 8-foot fence as an allowable alternative?
I'm not aware of any. No, even if the fence were set back 20 feet, it would still only be allowed at 6. The only provision which was mentioned by another member earlier would be the addition of materials that would be, what is it, 75% opaque?
The lattice
Yes,
area.
right, like
Yes.
the lattice work that would
Yep.
allow you to go up to 8, but it would have to meet that standard.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question too.
All right, Ms. Ditchman.
What, do you know, Mr. Mensah, how long has the 3 feet been in effect? Was that reduced recently in the last 4 years or no?
I'm sorry.
Has it always been 3 feet or was it 6 and then reduced? I thought it was higher than 3 feet, but maybe that's.
I don't know the answer to that. I'd be
Okay.
happy to bring it back to you. I'm a
That's
month
okay.
in. I don't know yet.
That's okay.
Sorry.
I actually, I can answer that a little bit.
Okay.
If Mr. Mensah doesn't mind. I don't mean to. As of roughly 1999, it was a 3-foot requirement, and you had to get a variance to seek a 6-foot fence. The challenge is with these houses that have basically 2 frontages. One frontage which may be their egress and ingress, and another frontage which would be on a thoroughfare. So the 3-foot requirement has been there, to my knowledge, at least since 1999.
Okay. With those questions answered, is there any motion with regards to this application?
Point of order, what would the motion be for? To approve or disapprove?
It would be our motions are always in the affirmative.
In the affirmative. I'll move to approve.
All right. And with regards to grounds, Mr. Smith, you need to specify which special exception you think this falls into.
Yeah, I think it falls under special exception 1 and 3. When the zoning code was enacted, I mean, the speed limit on Saginaw 69 was 35 miles per hour until I think it was the late 90s. I mean, it was quite a while. So the code was enacted with a different understanding of what the speed was, and I'd venture to guess with a different understanding of what the traffic would be on 69. And so I think when you look at special factor 1, practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships resulting from the physical characteristics of the property make it unfeasible to carry out the intent of the zoning code, I think it qualifies for that. The physical characteristic of the property is that it has a large frontage, a frontage that doesn't have a driveway on it, a non-facing frontage on Saginaw, with the speed limit, the traffic, that's going to create excessive noise. I think when you look at the federal recommendations for decibel limits, that factors in as well. In terms of special factor or special finding 3, I think it interferes with the property owner's quiet enjoyment of their home or property.
Okay. Mr. Mensah, do you think you can consolidate that motion down to something more succinct for purposes of our minutes? Or do I need
for the minutes, yes. On the fly, no, but for the minutes, yes.
Okay.
I can shorten that if it would make it easier, Mr. Mensah.
Why don't you try?
Just simply put, I think it satisfies special finding number 1 and special finding number 3. Does that suffice?
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
All right.
I'll second that.
Okay. Discussion. Mr. Laxton.
Yes. I hate to be the Grinch that stole fencing, but I think there's some important points I think I want to point out. First and foremost, I trust me, I have been where they are. The first house I lived in East Lansing, we had a 1-year-old, and the fencing was this old wire, rusted fencing that our house abutted Saginaw, and there was a steep drop down into the roadway with a 1-year-old child. The fence wasn't even really 3 feet. It's probably more like 2.5 feet. So I came before this body seeking a 6-foot fence, because having a child with a 3-foot rusted fence, we couldn't live there. And it took me 1.5 years to get that 6-foot fence. And I was livid. And it takes a lot to get me livid, but I was livid. So I understand what they're seeking. And I fully understand, because I live 3 houses down from where I used to live. So if you're coming up on Saginaw, coming up to Saginaw and Coolidge on the right-hand side, there's a fencing area right to the right as you're coming up to Coolidge. That's the fence that I built. So I understand that. But there's a particular problem I see being on this panel with these types of requests. One, I don't think while their request is certainly something that is meaningful and has merit. I hear the noise from Saginaw, just where I live, when we're out on our porch all the time too. So it's loud. But I don't think we have the ability to set policy, because the ordinance is drafted by city council. They're the ones that make the determination whether 6 foot is reasonable and for what reasons. So for us to, in essence, arbitrarily pick 8 feet and say that should be the new standard in East Lansing, because if we grant this for reasons nothing other than noise, we have set precedents in this city. So every homeowner or property owner along any thoroughfare would be well within their rights to come and ask for an 8-foot fence. And if we deny them, I would imagine a lawsuit in circuit court, because we've arbitrarily picked certain people over other people with the same exact set of facts and same exact property rights. So I don't think it's our job or even our charge. I don't think we're even allowed to set policy. I think where our charge is to take the policy that's set by city council and apply it to each property. So I'm all for doing what it takes to make sure that they can put that 6-foot fence back up on that property line. And with the extra 2-foot lattice or whatever that falls within the code. But I'm very uncomfortable in setting policy, just an ad hoc seat of our pants. I mean, I'm not a noise expert. I have no idea. I trust that the applicants do know what they're doing. But I'm not comfortable setting policy for this city in that fashion. I think if people want 8-foot fence along Saginaw, then I think they should go through the proper channels, petition city council, and have city council, which is our legislative body, make the changes within our ordinance. So as much as I hate to say this, I'm going to have to vote no. Not because I don't want to give these people their fence, but I don't think we have the right and I don't think we have the charge to be able to do this. And I think it's bad policy for us to do something like this when it will in essence set policy and precedent for every homeowner that lives along any thoroughfare with the same set of facts as these individuals. So unfortunately, for those reasons, I have to vote no.
Brian, can I ask what you did to get your fence built? What was the workaround to get that variance?
Persistence. I mean, all I was seeking was a 6-foot fence that was within the ordinance that was provided by city council.
So the ordinance does allow 6 foot.
Correct.
Okay.
6 foot, but you have to have. Typically, you would have a 6-foot fence, but you have to put it 20 feet from the property line. Now,
Right.
my understanding is they have it on the property line, which would have required some sort of variance to allow them to do that in the first place. So I think there's already been some consideration that was given to that property prior to these homeowners about the noise, because they were allowed to build that 6-foot fence right on the property line.
Right, but we don't have a record of that variance that was given to those property owners?
Correct. So either the prior owners did it illegally or improperly, or they got a variance. And I'm gonna assume they went through the proper channels.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, briefly. I think the lawsuit issue is effectively a non sequitur unless you can point out some specific lawsuits under identical situations, which I'm not familiar with. I think you're really relying on a slippery slope argument, which is, of course, a logical fallacy. So I don't think that argument holds any water whatsoever, and really is just undue fear mongering, quite frankly. And this really isn't a policy issue. This is under the unique circumstances and facts presented by these property owners. Do they qualify for a variance? I think the answer is yes. Nobody here that would be voting yes is saying that this should be a policy for all similarly situated properties, unless those unique circumstances meant that they did in fact qualify for a variance. We're not setting policy here. I think that argument just doesn't hold water, quite frankly. And if it is a policy issue, then city council can speak on that, but it's not. We have a specific charge here. That specific charge is to look at the factors enumerated in the zoning code and decide whether the circumstances of that property as presented to us qualify for a variance. I think the answer here is yes to that. Now, when we go to your 6-foot fence, Mr. Laxton, was your 6-foot fence on the property line or 20 feet back?
It was on the property line.
Okay, so, and it took you, what, you said 1.5 years to do that?
Correct.
Okay, I'm not sure how that's relevant, quite frankly. You requested a variance, you got a variance, it took 1.5 years. I mean, it's almost like by implication, you're saying that these property owners should have to go through the same hassle and wait 18 months.
I was answering a question to respond to that. Also, number one, I don't appreciate the use of fear mongering. I think that's wholly inappropriate in the situation. Okay, I think we're all professionals, so I would hope we would treat each other as professional. I don't believe I've said anything negative towards you or called you any names or anything. So I really don't appreciate that. And I think that frankly is the slippery slope, is to start doing that.
That's not what slippery slope means.
Gentlemen, I'm going to intervene here. We're not relitigating Mr. Laxton's exception request. Mr. Smith, if you have any further points, make them.
I don't have any further points, Mr. Hittner.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Law.
I will be voting no as well. And I just feel that I think that with all the scientific studies and information that was presented and the use of words like quantitative and statistics and the WHO standards and decibel measures, I way out of my league. I don't understand it. I'm not here to make a decision based on that. And to Brian's point, I truly believe that this is something that is an issue. They are close to the highway. though they did choose to build, they did choose to buy and live in that area, that should be brought to city council, because there are other homes that would be affected by this loud noise as well. I think it was Mr. Davy, correct me if I'm wrong, who said he would also be seeking a variance.
Mr. Weber, I believe.
Okay, my apologies, Mr. Weber, on that. So that's where I am. So thank you.
Ms. Chaljian?
Well, I guess I know, and I'm not going to name the addresses because I don't know the addresses, but I know if you drive down Saginaw, there are plenty of very high fences backing up to Saginaw. And I didn't mean to call Brian, I didn't mean it in an offensive way to ask how you got it. I meant realistically, was there ever a variance provided? Because it'd be interesting to know what we've done before, or what this board has done before, to allow all of these fences that do exist at that height to be there. So it's weird to me that we don't have any record of high fences along Saginaw, when I think majority of yards that are backed up to Saginaw do in fact have high fences. So to me, it just seems illogical, right? We're saying that this is something that city council doesn't allow, and that we're not allowed to do, but somehow they all exist. I want somebody to help me understand that like disconnection there. Because I think otherwise it fits within what I think personally that it fits within what our variance can do. I don't think we can, I mean, last week we were asking for expert material. Now they're citing things that are expert, and we're saying, well, that's too much for us. I mean, we have to, at some point, decide what it is that's going to allow us to make a variance and go from there. I think this is a situation where they're pointing out very good facts about why it's an uncomfortable place to live, and make a change that would improve the property and have no negative effects on the city. But that's my personal vote. I guess I'm just really confused as to why we're all like taking different sides, and we're not talking about what has already happened. Saginaw has tons of fences, 6 to 8 feet.
I just wanted to, my view of a variance is, when it meets the special findings, to have something that is allowed that's not otherwise determined to be allowed by the city, is the way I see this. So the concept is that maybe those fences are there because they were there before the zoning ordinance went into effect. But it doesn't matter. If they don't have a variance, the city has determined that they want a certain size fence in a certain location. And maybe the real issue is the city should change that. But that's not usually done through granting variances, because as Brian was saying, the next person down the road will say, I have a 6-foot fence, I want to put up another 6-foot fence. And the next person, I have a 6-foot fence, but I want an 8-foot fence. If the city wanted 6 or 8-foot fences along Saginaw the whole way, then they could make that a zoning decision. They haven't. And so the idea here with the variance is, do we allow something to violate the ordinance because there's some special reason to do that? And my feeling is this isn't a special reason, and we can't find a special reason for every house along Saginaw so they can continue to put up 6 or 8-foot fences. So I'll be voting no.
Okay, Ms. Law.
I agree with you. It's just that it seems to be such a broad issue that affects so many homes and so much property. And yes, there may be fences out there that are higher, but for all the reasons that Andrea just said, we don't know why they're tall. They may not be 8 feet. We really can't tell driving fast past it how high it is, So it's just, to me, too broad an issue for us to grant a variance at this time. I don't think it meets any of the findings. But it does, I do think, my opinion on this really is irrelevant, but I do think it's something for city council to decide, because it does seem to be a big issue that affects so many homes. And like I said, with all this scientific research and study, it needs to be deliberated at, the legislative level of city government. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm the only one who hasn't commented so far, so I'm going to take the opportunity to do it. I don't know that it fulfills special finding 1 concerning practical difficulties or unnecessary hardships. Certainly this property is unique in this neck of the Glencairn neighborhood. It's, you know, it backs onto Saginaw Street. That had to been, and it was known by the buyers when they purchased this thing 5 years ago. The noise situation hasn't changed in the last 5 years. The speed limits have been the same for the last 5 years. The vehicle traffic at 30,000 cars a day is probably about the same as it's always been. It's a noisy place. Without being glib about it, the realtor's mantra, location, 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 matters as a practical matter when you're buying a property. It may be too noisy to be useful to these folks. I don't dispute that it's an uncomfortable experience, at least when they're out of doors. I don't know that an 8-foot fence is going to solve their problem. Driving by, given the current state of vegetation up there, I'm not sure we'd notice 8 feet. But I also concur with those who don't see a limiting principle to us granting this kind of variance for this kind of request. I don't know how tall the fences are along Saginaw for those properties that back up to them. You know, the 3-foot height, which Mr. Menser points us to, and correctly, I think, in terms of it being applicable to a frontage, even on Saginaw Street, is particularly distressing. That's why I would urge these people to patch up their existing 6-foot fence if they can in any way do it. But I don't see the special finding 1 applies. The variations, that's the special finding 3, which is also suggested as grounds, is necessary for the preservation of a substantial property right possessed by other properties within the same zoning district. You know, enjoyment of the quiet enjoyment of one's property, I guess, is something that everybody in the Glencairn neighborhood and every other neighborhood in East Lansing is entitled to. But again, when you buy a property that backs up to a state trunk highway, that's the situation you're in. It's a whole lot different if you're a block south or 2 blocks south removed from that traffic noise. And you know, I don't think it's within the capacity of this board to create an environment that the builders of the house and now the buyers of the house have put themselves in. This may not be a pleasant place, and I'm sorry that it isn't, but I don't know that our board can fix it. I concur with those who think if there's going to be, you know, noise reduction for property owners abutting state trunk highways or other major thoroughfares in this town, it's going to have to come from a decision by the council to change the fence ordinance. As it is, I don't see that we fill either special finding. I'll be voting no as well. All right. Are there any other comments or discussion from board members? All right. Seeing none, we'll call the question. Mr. Menser, do we need to take a roll call?
Yes.
All right, if you would.
Member Hittner?
No.
Member Laxton?
No.
Member Chalgian?
Yes.
Member Smith?
Yes.
Member Cheltenham is absent. Member Lull?
No.
Member Ditchman?
No.
5-1.
I counted 4-2, Mr. Menser.
Sorry. Yes, my apologies.
Okay. All right. Ms. Weber and Mr. Bradburd, that's your answer from the board. I don't give you any pleasure in giving that to you, but that's our answer.
Great. Thank you for your time.
You bet. All right. Let's see. Oops. All right. Next item of business is a request from Laura and Jamie Fanning to construct a 6-foot tall solid fence along the side yard facing a street where only a 3-foot tall solid fence is allowed at 1505 Abbot Road. Mr. Menser, what do we need to know?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So our staff memo starts on page 26 of the PDF packet that's on the city's website. So not a lot to report here, just it's a similar request in the sense that it's about a fence and it's about height, but this is located at 1505 Abbot Road. It's on the west side of Abbott, property zoned R1. They're proposing to construct a 6-foot tall solid fence along the side yard facing the street. So again, as we talked about earlier, the city allows up to a 3-foot tall solid fence on the property line. Once you get 20 feet away from that, you can go up to 6 feet. In this case, they're proposing a 6-foot tall. It's not 6 foot tall the entire length, but there is at maximum height, it is 6 feet tall. So this property is on Abbott. Like I said, on the west side, this proposal would be, the fence would be along Abbott Road. And again, we've done some research on variances of this type. There was one that my colleague found in 2010 for a property, and there's an air photo attached for that that just shows that property and how it's laid out for your consideration. So right now there's this kind of a replacement fence situation proposed. They're replacing part of a low split rail fence with a solid privacy fence. And there's 72 feet of frontage along Abbott Road there. So it'll be consisting of part of a solid fence, part of it's a privacy fence, and then it transitions down to a 3-foot fence you'll see north of the driveway. The applicant is on the call and is able to answer questions and provide any additional information that you may need in making a determination on this request. Thank you.
I'm probably remiss in not putting the same choices to Mr. and Mrs. Fanning concerning whether they want to proceed with tonight's 6-member board or whether they'd like continuance to another meeting for the opportunity to have 7. Mr. and Mrs. Fanning, do either one of you want to speak on that threshold issue?
Hi there. This is Laura Fanning. Thank you so much for your time. We're both here, both Jamie and I. Just for clarity of record, we are actually Mrs. and Mrs. Fanning. And we would like to move forward this evening with the matter at hand with those of you that are present.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Any questions for Mr. Menser? I have one or two if I can. So Peter, the north side of this L-shaped lot doesn't go actually up to the next residential street, whatever that is, that loops into the planned unit development. There's like a narrow strip of land. So so the north side of this property would be eligible for a 6-foot fence as of right.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. All right. Does that prompt any other questions for Mr. Menser? Okay. That being the case, we're now ready to hear from Jamie and or Laura Fanning.
Hi there, this is Laura Fanning again. I'm the chatty one, so I'll go ahead and do the speaking. Okay. So just to give you, I'm not very brief, so I'll try to be a little bit of background. We purchased this home 2 years ago. We closed I believe, in June, and then did some work on the inside of the home, and then actually started living in it in August of 2019. We're a family of 4. We currently have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old daughter. So when we purchased the home, it was the summertime. Students weren't really around. And when you buy a home, we literally offered the first day. Everything looks perfect. And we love the house, but as we've had the last 2 years to live here, we've realized that the fact that we are on Abbot Road when students are in is quite different than the time of year it was when we purchased the home when students are not. And so currently the way the home is fenced in, I'm not sure if you have all the documents that I do, but if you look at page 11, I did some lovely artwork on that to kind of show you what we're proposing to do. So if you look at our property, something that I heard you say, Mr. Menzner, that I might have just misunderstood, but just to clarify, the front of the property is actually along Abbott is actually quite a bit more than 72 feet. The 72 feet is the part that we're proposing switch to 6 feet tall. So the fencing that is, first of all, we are planning on changing the fencing on the south side of our driveway, but we are planning on simply replacing what is already there with a vinyl longer lasting material that falls within the ordinance of the city already. So there's no variance request for any portion of that. And then on the north side of the driveway, that section of the yard is entirely fenced in from the back of our home all around to that side of our property. So that is, we don't let our children play in the property that's on the south side of the driveway because we don't see it as being safe. It's not completely enclosed. And a lot of the other things we'll tell you about that occurs on Abbott is a problem where the children don't play in that section of yard. They play in the enclosed area. But as we have lived there, we've identified a couple problems with what is currently going on with encompassing that front section of the property. So in the 72 feet that we have marked, as well as then if you see the pink, the 8 feet that I have listed as wanting to do a transitional from a 6 foot down to a 4 feet, currently is a very old wood split rail that has metal grating attached to it. And then just inside the fence, which that fence is lying on our property line, you'll see further back in the packet, is a survey that we had done. Just into that then are giant bushes. So the previous owners, who were actually the original builders from 1960, they died in the home in their 90s. It was pretty amazing. They had used those bushes as a barrier. The problem with the bushes, which we realized a week or two into owning the home, is that they're humongous. The bushes I've measured early on before they get too crazy out of control are 6.5 feet tall. And because they have been around for so incredibly long, they grow into our fence and they grow out into the sidewalk. So by the time that we actually took ownership of the home, the bushes were already halfway over the sidewalk. It was huge. So we have worked as best we can to keep those bushes trim, obviously because we have a lot of foot traffic and biking traffic, and that gets in the way of things. But to be honest with you, because of the lay of the ground, it's actually hard to get to the top of them to keep them trim from the inside, because the ground is actually lower on the inside. So you have to get tall up on a ladder, and it's difficult to keep up with them how fast they grow. So we started noticing those were a problem. But we realized that if we remove those, it adds to our barrier problem, being that we have 2 young children. As soon as students started coming in the fall of 2019, we realized that there's a lot of things that go on in that sidewalk right next to where our children's sandbox is and their play climber that involve things that we don't really want our children witnessing. So football game days, drunk students walking by, interesting language, things like that, that we don't really want them repeating or hearing or seeing on a regular basis. So we realized that we need a barrier, at least in that section, because that's where they spend a lot of their time. And then we started looking at fence options when we realized that the bushes have now beaten the fence down. I did enclose some pictures of the fence where like the rails are actually starting to come out of the holes, where we realized that for, you know, to not look run down in the neighborhood, we're going to need to do something to that fence this year. So we started realizing, well, it would be nicer for people that were walking on the sidewalk if there wasn't bushes growing right there, that if we couldn't keep up with it immediately would grow in their way. And it would be easier for us to maintain if we replace the bushes with a fence. And since the bushes are currently 6.5 feet tall in a certain section, we said, well, if we switch to a vinyl privacy fence and took the bushes out, then from the top, the visual height will actually be 1/2 foot lower, if not more, than it is when the bushes are there. And then as we talked about, well, what would we do? Because we recognized that the reasons for wanting lower fences is for visibility and safety. And we identified that, especially, which is one of the reasons we're not changing anything about the style or height of the fence on the south side, is because we really want to be considerate of the community and walking and biking on the corner of Lurie and Abbott. As Mr. Hinner pointed out, the north side of our property comes up to property that is part of the Abbott Woods condo community. And then I'm not sure how many feet, but a significant number of feet then over from our property is their private drive. So the location of the bushes or the fence where we would put it don't obstruct any kind of view for a driver, seeing a biker, or anything like that, because there's open space next to that next drive for them. But I knew that it wouldn't be safe or appropriate or agreed upon by the community to have the 6-foot tall fence go the whole way down. So as we started researching the kind of material we wanted to use, which is a vinyl fencing that's low maintenance, long lasting, appears well kept, because obviously being a house on the front of our neighborhood, you know, we recognize that the outside appearance of our home is noticed by people, and we don't want it to appear run down. And so I found that while it was difficult to find any kind of vinyl vertical fencing that went down to 3 feet, it was pretty common. And that would be the non-privacy, the kind that has, like, you know, I forget exactly what the terminology is, but I think it's at least 40 or 50% non-obstructing, where it has rails, but you can still have visibility. There was a fair amount of options that were at the 4-foot level. And I found that you could get a piece of fence that would transition from a 6-foot to a 4-foot level, so that it would not be an eyesore to the community as we dropped it down. And then part of the timing of this, aside from the fact that our fence is starting to come apart, is that the house that we bought is actually sinking. And so we are having construction come in this summer, support the part of the house that's sinking so it stops going down, which involves ripping off our deck and replacing our deck. And so
ripping out our fencing
and ripping up. So to get all of that done at the same time makes a little bit more logical sense. So that's how this started. I could go on maybe with a little bit more about our reasons why we think that we meet the special findings, as well as why the other options don't work, if that's okay. Or does anyone have any questions for us before I move on to that?
Go ahead, Ms. Fanning.
Okay. So first of all, I think that if you look at the surrounding area, I appreciate that there are ordinances that set up specific rules regarding fences for the general East Lansing community, because every street, every neighborhood is different. I think one of the things that sets our home aside is that it is on Abbot Road, and just noticing the difference from when we viewed and purchased our home in the amount of vehicle traffic and foot traffic and bike traffic compared to when September 1 hits and every MSU student is back. It was one of the like only blessings of the curse of this horrible year of COVID was that, oh my gosh, the amount of traffic and the terror of when my children were, right on the edge of the driveway, that something would happen was lowered. And we love the community in East Lansing. We love the students. But having 2 young children, we do feel it's important to have a space that is safe for them and somewhat protected from some of the things that you can be exposed to. And so we feel that the amount of traffic on Abbott and the amount of foot traffic with multiple apartment complexes being along Abbott, that we do have students going back and forth routinely. There's a local bar just a block or 2 away at Reno's, which is fun, but does, cause some lively activity before afterwards. So those are some of the special exceptions that we feel we have. And then one of the things that I was challenged to think about is, well, why couldn't we just move the fence in 20 feet like the ordinance recommends? And the main reasons for that, there's several, but one of them is 20 feet into my property is this beautiful tree. I've attached some pictures of Jamie holding a tape measure to show you approximately 20 feet back from our property line where that falls. That falls right into the middle of my children's in-ground sandbox. And it also falls into this beautiful tree that there's no way I'm going to destroy just to put, the 6 foot tall fence back that far. And if we would put the fence back even further, then the area of property where the children are playing, the sandbox and that sort of thing is now outside the fence, which removes the protection that we're looking to have. And then another benefit to the privacy fence as compared to what we have now is that anyone that lives in East Lansing knows that much like many 18 to young 20 somethings, they're not always the best at cleaning up after themselves. So it's not uncommon for a Saturday morning or a Sunday activity to go out and pick up bottles or cans or wrappers that are strewn in that front kind of part of the grass that's not my property, but I cut sort of thing.
Well,
And
I also find that stuff when I'm mowing my lawn, they throw it over my bushes or they throw it in my bushes.
well, because the fence is porous currently, and I don't mind cleaning up after our community, but the area that we're trying to fence in is the area that's directly in front of our children's play area and the sandbox, with the idea being that I don't really want my 6-year-old coming up and being like, hey, here's this empty carton of cigarettes that just blew through the fence into my sandbox. So that's kind of where we chose the priority of, hey, we don't need to have a variance for our entire yard, but we really are asking for it for this section.
All right. Are there any questions for?
I've got a few questions.
Okay.
And forgive me if these are sort of the answers are sort of implied in the materials submitted, but you mentioned that you have a sprinkling system. Is that right?
Hold on. Yeah.
Yes, I forgot to mention that. Sorry.
Well,
we have a sprinkler system, and right now a majority of our heads are located on that property line where those bushes and stuff are. And I think it was because the homeowners before us wanted to be able to water them without having to go out and water them. So if we pushed the fence back, we would then have to have that either repiped, moved, or just taken out of our sprinkler system altogether.
Okay. So is it fair to say the sprinkling system covers the entire yard, including the 20 feet that you'd like to include within the fenced area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But it's also fair to say that you could either cap the system there or just repipe the system.
Yes, we would have to pay to have someone come in and change it.
Okay. Have you had that costed out to see how much it would cost, say in comparison to a fence?
So we haven't, primarily because I'm not going to tear down the tree that's in the way. And that's a pretty hard stop for me. It's this gorgeous, really old tree. And so
Provides a lot of shade for our yard.
truthfully, it and the area of the yard being a primary area that the children play in, because you can see it from the deck where us adults sit. So it's an easily viewed area for the kids. I don't think in our minds moving the fence is an option.
Okay. Well, I've got just a couple of follow-ups, and I think you've already implied the answer, so please bear with me if you could. You could move the play area though, right? You could move that to be within the area, to say the 20 feet back that would be allowed under the zoning ordinance.
It's something that could be done, but it's a solid wood structure playground set that we've gotten, and it wasn't fun to put up in the beginning. And I can't imagine it would be very easy to then move.
Okay. Well, it's also fair to say that it's not easy to put up a fence, so there would be an
we're
offset
definitely
there.
hiring someone for the
Right,
fence.
right.
That's for sure.
Gotcha. Is it possible too, have you had somebody who builds fences come out and look at the property and come up with options?
Yes. So actually, I misinterpreted the ordinance. And so the initial reading I read, I considered this to be a side yard, an area that I would be allowed to put a 6-foot fence in. The company that we've hired to do the work of helping to lift our house, rip off our deck and all that stuff is the company that's also going to be doing our fence. It's Hatcher Construction. So when they came out and they did a whole property survey and we started talking, and they said, hey, we think you need to talk to the city. The way we're reading this, we're not sure that we're allowed to do it the way that you want to do it without getting a variance. And so you need to talk to them first. So they are the company that will be having do the fence when we have a fence done. And they are the ones that recommended that we talk to the city when we started talking to Darcy.
And I mean, they've given us other options of fencing to put up there, but none of it gives us the privacy of a privacy fence.
Yeah.
They've offered options that, are slated to where you can see through it, to where it doesn't offer any privacy really for our kids playing in the yard. So I think that's one of the reasons that the homeowners initially put the bushes up, was they didn't want to try to apply for a variance. So they put the fence that they knew they were allowed to have.
I don't even know if it was that, because again, so we bought the home as an estate sale from the owner's son. The owners died in their early 90s, and the son was in his 70s when he sold it to us. And it had been one family that had owned it the whole time. So I think that they hadn't, when we moved in, the neighbors behind us said it's so amazing to hear young children's voices in the side yard. And it's an amazing side yard. And it was really interesting so I didn't know how this process went. We've not had like fences or things like this or lived in the city of East Lansing before. And so when the notification came out about it, like I hadn't even realized at first that like there was going to be a posting or letters to our neighbors. So people started coming by and talking to us about it and saying, so, okay, what are you wanting to do? And what are you thinking about? And what are your reasoning? And it was amazing.
I hate to interject here, but I do have a few more questions if that's okay.
Sure. Go ahead. Sorry.
And the reason I asked if you talked to somebody to kind of spec out the fence is, did you ask if you could build the fence around the tree so that you don't have to cut it down?
I did not ask that because I can see where the roots of the tree are. They come out almost entirely to the fence that is there now. So I can see that if we needed to put a fence in, part of it would have to go back out to the curb where it is anyway, because the fence, the limbs of the tree, I forget what you call those. Yeah, the roots are so big that you can feel them in the ground as you walk towards the fence. If you look at those pictures, you can see we basically have a deck, and then we have like a grass walkway that goes between the giant tree and the fence. And that's
Yeah.
at the point where the fence is kind of right there at the edge.
Okay, but it's fair to say you haven't had the actual fence builder give you an opinion on that though, right?
Well, I asked about moving the fence actually closer to the tree in an area because we are also looking at getting a spot where we can back a car in because it's really unsafe to back out of our driveway. And when I asked him if we could move the fence around that tree, so I didn't say move the whole fence. When I asked if we could move the fence around the tree, he said that we couldn't do it and that we couldn't put anything else in the ground by that. And so we were actually directed that we have to have the backing up part put on the south side of the property because he didn't want us to cut into the ground by the tree at all.
We would probably have to take the tree down if we wanted.
If we wanted to do that.
One final question, because I feel I'm monopolizing time here, but is it fair to say that those bushes that the fence would at least partially replace provide a fair amount of privacy and insulation from road noise?
They do.
The road noise though isn't why we're trying to do it.
Right.
No,
It's solely for the safety of our children.
yeah.
The noise on Abbott is not something that bothers us. And you know, Abbott is a high traffic road.
We knew we were buying a house
We
on
knew we
a
were
busy
buying
street.
it.
It's more that we didn't
So-
realize the comments and the activity by the college students because it was summer and they weren't really around at the beginning.
When we first bought this house, we left for vacation and there is a police report. When we came back, we had somebody living in our 3 Seasons room.
We did. That's true. That was an experience.
So that was, and that was, an experience.
We got
but
some new locks.
yeah, we got some new
They were able to
locks.
break in too easily.
And so, maybe a little bit taller of a fence with a little bit more seclusion would show people that people actually live here, because all of the toys in their 3 Season room did not.
And if you see the fence, a majority of it, where the bushes are not, is very open and doesn't protect from noise at all. And we're not looking to change that. I would have been fine to go back down to 3.5 feet, which is what in the section that's not where the bushes are, which is what there currently is. They just don't make it in the vinyl materials. They do 4 foot. So the extra 6 inches from the 3.5 feet to the 4 foot on the other portion is what allows us to use the same materials.
Yeah, we're looking for something more sturdy, that helps keep our kids contained into an area and keep
it's
them
pleasant
safe.
for our neighbors
Yeah,
walking by.
and it
Everyone's
looks nice.
actually been excited about us doing it, to be honest.
I think a lot of our neighbors kind of don't like our bushes. So
Yeah, they've been honest about that.
Okay, any other questions from board members? I have a couple for you ladies. So I'm a little confused as to whether the fence you're looking for is for privacy or for keeping your young children contained and their toys and the sort of stuff that young kids play with contained. Can you clarify for me what the...
I think to me, those are the same things as a parent. So protecting and keeping my children safe is partly keeping my children in the environment that they need to stay in, which the 4 foot, vertical rail that we're going to do on the one portion to replace this part rail meets that, right? It keeps my kids in. My kids are not climbing. They better not be climbing over a 4 foot fence. But to me, safety for my kids also is safety from exposure to things that a 6 and a 9-year-old don't really need to be exposed to. And so that's the other that comes with privacy. That's the other part of it. So to me, those are kind of the same things. I don't have out of control children that are going to like scale a 4 foot fence and need a 6 foot fence. But it's really the difference between that safety you get from everyone that's walking by not being able to look in on my 6 to 9-year-old daughters as they're playing in the sprinkler and having a little privacy, and from that sort of standpoint, and then from them not witnessing, this or that MSU student after a win at the football stadium.
All right. And I understand that your current set of shrubs along that portion of the sidewalk are overgrown.
Yeah.
Have you I believe the fence ordinance allows, if it's not a solid fence, 4.5 feet worth of height if it's got the 40% or
Yes.
more than 40% open.
Yeah.
Have you considered, is there a reason why you discarded that as an option, particularly if you backed it up with a new set of shrubs?
Yeah. So I think partially because to rip the shrubs out, put a new set of shrubs in, and get a 4-foot fence that still doesn't really provide that complete, people can still look through, shrubs are only private in the summer in Michigan, let's say between May and September, when when they're blooming, right? So there's the ones that we have right now are crazy overgrown, and there's still a lack of privacy when the leaves are not filling in through there, you can see through. So I think my thought was, if I'm going to go up to 4.5 feet, but still have things see through, it felt reasonable to say, here are the reasons why I think my home environment, Abbot Road, all of these things makes our situation different than a majority of the people in East Lansing, that a variance would be reasonable for this, and ask for that section of 6 feet. I think we tried to limit it to what we felt like was reasonable, which is why we weren't trying to enclose the whole side yard in 6 feet, because it didn't really seem reasonable to ask for that. But I think, to answer your question, it doesn't prevent things from coming in the yard. It doesn't provide as much protection for our daughters. So that's why we didn't feel like it was, is it an option? Yes. Was it the appropriate and best option for our family? We felt no.
Okay. All right. Does my questions prompt any others from the board members? All right. Thank you, ladies. Mr. Menser, do we have any written comments related to this particular application?
No, sir.
Okay. Are there any other folks online, Ms. Urdialis, who might want to be speaking on this particular application?
The attendee that is still waiting is Jessica Livingston, and I believe she did not want to speak on this application, but we could ask her.
Okay. Ms. Livingston, do you have anything we need to know?
No, thank you for asking. I have no comment.
Okay. Is that it, Ms. Urdialis?
Yes, that is it.
Okay. Right. This is where we would move to deliberations, but as I did with the other applicants, I'll give these applicants an opportunity once again to consider, or perhaps reconsider, their decision to be heard by only 6 board members tonight. Do you ladies still want to go forward, or do you want to hold off to another meeting?
We do want to go forward. And if I could just say just one more thing about setting us apart a little different too, that I don't think I did a good job of showing in the pictures, which is that if you were familiar where a property is located at, we sit directly across from the Mid-Michigan ENT building and a large parking lot. And I mentioned that because that does significantly increase the driving traffic in our particular area, with people coming to those doctor's offices and that sort of thing, when you compare to maybe a different spot on Abbott that is at a different location. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Okay, thank you. All right. That being the case, we can begin our deliberations. Anybody have comments or thoughts Well, as a threshold matter, do I have a motion with regards to approval of the request? Mr. Smith?
Nobody else. This is more of a point of order too. Do we need a motion to proceed? I mean, and the reason I ask this, what if there isn't anybody that favors the approval of the application? What happens? Is it just left hanging?
No, I mean, the application is, as far as I can tell, Mr. Mentor can correct me, but if there's no motion to approve, then the application fails for lack of that motion. Do I have that right, Mr. Mentor?
I'm consulting your bylaws. Haven't been to, this is my second meeting. Not that I shouldn't know all this, but I'm looking right now.
I will move to approve under special finding 3 that the variation is necessary for the preservation of a substantial property right possessed by other properties within the same zoning district.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Mr. Laxton. All right, discussion? Ms. Chaljian, you have something to say in support of your motion?
Yeah, so I'm going to, or I believe that that's the right special finding. I think that, well, I know that there's a property directly down the road that has a very high fence as well. I don't know if it's 6 feet or 8 feet, but it's definitely not 3 feet that blocks their street. So I'm sure we've done variances before, but I didn't see that on our report, or maybe not. But I do agree, I've lived in that area, and I do agree that there is significant student traffic in that specific corner of Abbott, right off Saginaw. So if you go further down the street, maybe not as much big of a problem, but certainly right there. And I can understand that that's a serious impact on their right to privacy in their yard. And I think that that's enough for a variance.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I guess I'll say something briefly. I don't think that this property qualifies. It seems like there are, I mean, first of all, the bushes provide some level of privacy, and I think quite possibly that there are fencing options that would provide all or nearly all of what they're asking for that would fall within the zoning ordinance, whether that's moving it back 20 feet or using a partial privacy fence or just going with the 3 feet fence. I mean, for good or ill, living in a college town entails putting up with certain things, and that includes college students and the things that they do. I think we're all very familiar with that, living in East Lansing.
Anyone else? Mr. Laxton?
Yeah, I think this is I think the request hasn't been tailored so that it's a reasonable request based upon a right that many other people in the community that have, which is a fence, a 6-foot fence along the property line. I think it's reasonable. I also believe that there are conditions as such, safety of the children, privacy. These are all reasons why we've granted similar items in the past. I don't see anything that would differentiate this property from those that have been granted the variances. I think it's always difficult with properties that have side yards, front yards, backyards. We're a community that wants to promote young families with young children, and I'm all for doing something that's within our charge that promotes that. So I'm going to be voting yes on this.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I guess I'll offer my 2 cents. I understand what Mr. Laxton is saying, but I'm frankly having a little difficulty distinguishing the difference between traffic noise and whatever commotion passing student pedestrians, customers from Reno's, etc., might generate. I'm glad that Mrs. and Mrs. Fanning have taken on this property. I am sympathetic to homeowners who take on a parcel that has been in long-standing hands with previous / original owners, and the challenges that go with bringing that sort of property up to contemporary living standards and expectations. 6 and 9-year-old children, I've had a couple of those quite a while back now myself, are, at least in my experience, and I suspect in theirs, reasonably responsive to directives. They sometimes, maybe oftentimes, have momentary lapses of recollection on those kinds of directions. But these are 6 and 9-year-old, they aren't toddlers. I understand the interest in keeping their play area reasonably safe and somewhat separated from the passing traffic, pedestrian and otherwise. I'd note that portion of Abbott is undergoing road dieting as we speak. So the 4 lanes will turn into 3 with some bike lanes. I don't know if that'll change the volume of traffic, but I think it may change the characteristics to some degree. I certainly hope that that's the case. That may not address the specific concerns about the issues they have with their property, but it is where it is. I understand that this substantial property right possessed by others, but they bought what they bought in the last 2 years. Maybe this isn't a great place for 2 little children. I don't know. I'll leave that to their sound discretion and determination. But I don't see a substantial difference between this case and the one we just dealt with in terms of granting the variance. And so I will be voting no as well.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
May I want to just clarify something that I'm not sure if I made the last vote clear. I was not distinguishing between traffic noise. I was distinguishing between a 6-foot fence and an 8-foot fence.
Okay.
I've been on this panel for 10 years. I have no recollection of ever approving an 8-foot fence.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? All right, Mr. Mentor, if you'd call the roll, please.
Yes, sir. Member Hittner.
No.
I want to keep track better this time. Member Laxton.
Yes.
Member Chalgan.
Yes.
Member Smith.
No.
Member Lal.
No.
Member Ditchman.
No.
4-2, no.
All right, Mrs. Fanning, you have your answer from the board.
Could I ask a question?
Surely.
I apologize. I was trying to raise my hand. I didn't know if I was allowed to talk before you voted. I guess my question is that in this meeting this evening, we actually discussed 2 previous variances that were very similar to this. The one that was in the paperwork that Mr. Menster gave that was on the Arden Avenue, and then actually the other one that Mr. Laxton himself got. And so I just wondered, his experience was it took 1.5 years, and how we move forward to try again.
Well, Mr. Menser, I think, can probably discuss with you your appeal options from here. As I understand the law, the appeal from the finding of the zoning board is to the circuit court. And so they'll have a transcript or recording of tonight's discussions. I don't frankly know what the standard of review is, whether a judge reviews it de novo or applies some other legal standard to determine whether our conclusions this evening were proper or not. And if you're inclined to proceed in that way, you might want to consider legal counsel to guide you through that process.
I'd be happy to follow up with you tomorrow about your options. In addition to what the chair has mentioned, there are, if the request were to be changed, and I don't want to get into the details of that now, but I can follow up with you and go over that in terms of what you may consider to bring back to the board.
Thank you.
All right, ladies. Thank you. All right. Moving on our agenda. Oops. Okay. Next item is our board member concerns. I was thinking this might be a reasonable place to pigeonhole introductions of board members. We have Mr. Smith as a new member. We have Mr. Menser as our new staff member. Glad to have both of you all on board. Unfortunately, we don't have our additional substitute member of the board, Kojo Inu, with us. It'd be nice to introduce ourselves to him as well, but I guess it'd be helpful. I'd like to know more about Mr. Smith and Mr. Menser, and they might or might not want to hear a whole lot about me, but I'm happy to provide some, at least a bit of brief background as to who I am and how it is I happen to be on the zoning board. And it'd be helpful, I think, if the other members would do likewise. So I will start. As I may have indicated earlier during the course of the hearings, I've been a 21-year-long resident of East Lansing. I'm an attorney by long ago training and experience. I haven't been in active practice for quite a while. I have been active in other civic activities. I live in the Bailey neighborhood. The Bailey Pump House Board is one of my deals. I've been chair of the neighborhood association. Lots of school related activities as my two now 20-something-year-old sons were progressing through all of the various stops in the East Lansing Public Schools. And I was a Transportation Commission member and the chair of that board for a number of years. I think I was on the commission for probably 7 or 8 years. Brian Laxton is responsible for sucking me into that engagement. And when I was done with that, somebody thought it'd be a good idea that I get on this board. So that's how I happen to be here. Andrea?
I think I've been on the roster says I've been on this board since 2016. That's hard to believe. But I live in East Lansing, of course, and have 2 kids, one that's graduated, one that's going to be a senior next year. I'm an attorney and I work with the state in Lara with licensing. And I guess that's it.
Susan?
So I'm Susie Chalgen. I'm an attorney in East Lansing, doing mostly probate and special needs work. I've lived in East Lansing all my life except for undergrad. So that's, 30 some years. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Isma?
Hi, I'm Isma Lala. I've lived in East Lansing since '94. I have a son who's going to be a middle schooler at McDonald. I'm an attorney by training, but I mostly run my real estate business. I own apartments in Lansing, and I just love my tenants. I really do. I'm one of those landlords that really cares about my people. Anyway, they're always texting me. I give them advice on stuff. But anyway, enough of that. I also just recently started substitute teaching here and there in the public school in East Lansing, mainly at McDonald. It just sort of fell into that I'm now like the backup substitute teacher. So when the building subs there aren't enough, the secretaries call me and I come on in. And there's my cat. Okay. All right. Told you he'd make an appearance. All right.
Thank you. Brian?
Sure. I'm Brian Laxton. I have been a resident since 1998. Have been on this board since 2012. And I have 4 children. One's just graduating from Kalamazoo College. One's just graduating from East Lansing High School. So it's a busy spring time, summertime for us. That's it.
Okay. Joshua?
Hi, Joshua Smith. I am an attorney. I've lived in East Lansing for just over 19 years continuously. I'm not counting the 2 years when I was in grad school at Michigan State back in the mid-90s. I currently work for the Department of Insurance and Financial Services in the Office of Legal Counsel. Prior to that, I was a litigator at the Michigan Department of Attorney General. Both of my kids graduated from East Lansing. Our oldest is a rock musician in California in a band called the Warbly Jets. And our youngest just finished her freshman year at Michigan.
Cool. All right. Peter?
Thank you. I had to look the Warbly Jets up. They're on Wikipedia, so they made it.
They rock.
Google them right quick.
They rock.
I'll have to check that out. Hi, everybody. So I'm Peter Menser. I'm really happy to be with you. I'm the new planning and zoning administrator for the city. I came here from, my last job was at Meridian Township. So I was with them since 2006 in a similar capacity, kind of rose through the ranks there. But I have a lot of experience with Planning Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, policy initiatives, legislative council, with Township Board, now City Council, and just a lot of planning and zoning experience. I went to Western for urban and regional planning, went back for a master in public administration in 2009. So I came to the city. I've been on staff for a month. I'm definitely getting to know the ordinances a lot better. I mean, I have a very good general understanding of everything, but there's definitely some differences. And I will certainly learn more about this group as time goes on. And I've had your bylaws up all evening. So looking forward to that. But I'm really appreciative to be here, and I hope to, I think my professional job, or my job here, is to make sure that you all have the information you need to make educated decisions about these cases, which I know is never easy. So that's really, I'll endeavor to do that every month. And I hope that we can have a long working relationship together.
All right. Thank you, sir. Peter and I have been emailing back and forth a couple of times anyway. I took a suggestion from Brian, and Peter's now running with it, to solicit and plan for a date for some refresher familiarization training for all of us with regards to the zoning board duties, responsibilities, limitations, etc. And I think either he or Rebecca will be in touch with everybody to see if there's a date that we can all mutually agree on that works with everyone's schedule and those of likely corporation counsel trainer. I don't know how soon that's likely to be. Summertime may be problematic, but it would be nice if we could get it done sooner rather than later, so that all of us are operating from at least an equal baseline of awareness.
If I could comment, I've got the city attorney on the hook for a training, and they've done it many times and feel comfortable doing it. I did a similar thing multiple times, I guess, with our zoning board of appeals in Meridian Township. So it's more of a matter, I guess I'm just trying to nail down some dates when the attorney might be available for that. And I'll get that to you. It would be ideal to do it on a date that you've got a meeting scheduled already that maybe we don't have any cases for, but there's definitely a case for the July meeting already.
Okay.
So hopefully we try to get a training sooner than August. But it depends on your schedules and the attorney's schedule, but I will keep you in the loop for sure.
Okay. All right. Any other board member concerns? All right. Is there any old business that we need to be aware of, Mr. Menser?
No, sir, not tonight.
Okay. Any other announcements of any kind? All right. All right. That being the case, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Very quickly, if I could,
Oh,
I
sure.
do want to apologize for Mr. Laxton. I clearly offended him early. That was not my intent, so I do apologize for that. Sometimes the litigator in me gets the best of me.
No worries. No worries. I think that goes with having too many lawyers on one panel. So no worries.
Thank you, Joshua, for that.
There's a reason they don't invite us to parties.
Is that it? Oh. Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion. So
All right.
Second.
All right. We're done. All right. Thank you, folks.
Everybody.
See you
Thanks,
next
everyone.
month.
Have a good evening.
All right.
See you in July.